The city of Aris Prime never truly slept. Its towers of silver and glass reached far into the skies, glowing with neon rivers of light. Hover vehicles swarmed like insects between platforms, and banners of noble houses fluttered from every high balcony. Music from grand halls mixed with the low hum of engines, creating a restless harmony of power and wealth. To many, it was the heart of civilization, a place of progress and pride. But to Lysera, it had become a prison. Lysera stood in the shadow of her family's palace, her heart pounding in her chest. The announcement had been made only hours ago. The marriage contract was sealed, her name tied forever to a man she had never loved. She had stood beside her parents while officials proclaimed the union, forced to smile though her stomach had twisted with dread. It was not a wedding of choice, it was a bargain of politics. Her voice, her dreams, her desires, none of them mattered. She was a daughter of House Veari, and her fate was decided for her, but not tonight. Her hands shook as she pulled the hood of a travel cloak over her head. The fabric was plain, nothing like the rich silk she usually wore. She had stolen it from the servants' quarters. Around her waist, a small pouch carried all she dared to bring: a few credits, a worn data pad, and a tiny pendant her mother had given her long ago. The rest, the jewels, the gowns, the grand titles, she left behind. She whispered to herself, "I am not theirs anymore." Slipping past the guarded gates had been the first challenge. Fortunately, the nobles of Aris rarely noticed the movements of their own workers. Lysera walked among the evening servants with a lowered gaze, her cloak covering her face. Every step felt heavy, as though eyes were watching her from the dark walls, but no alarm rang out, and soon she was through the outer gardens, breathing the cooler night air. The starport lay in the distance, glowing with countless lights. If she could reach it, she might book passage on a freighter. She did not care where it went. Anywhere was better than here. Yet danger followed close behind. By now, her disappearance would be discovered. Guards would be sent to search the city. Her name carried weight. The noble houses would not allow a runaway to stain their honor. Lysera knew she had little time. Her heart raced faster as she hurried through crowded markets, blending with the ordinary citizens. She had never walked here alone before. She had always been surrounded by attendants, protected from the dust, the smells, and the noise. Now, every sound seemed sharp, every shadow a threat. And still, she pressed forward. At the edge of the lower districts, a line of hover taxis waited for passengers. Most were old, patched with spare parts, their paint scratched by years of work. The drivers leaned against their vehicles, calling out to travelers with practiced voices. Lysera paused, uncertain. Could she trust any of them? What if they recognized her? But footsteps echoed behind her, armored soldiers pushing through the crowd, scanning faces with cold devices. Panic surged in her chest. She had to choose. Her eyes fell on a taxi at the far end of the line. It was older than the rest, its engines humming unevenly. The man in the driver's seat was human, his features unlike those of her own kind. Most of the galaxy saw humans as simple laborers or wanderers, rarely important enough to notice. Perhaps, she thought, that was exactly why he might help her. She rushed forward, pulling open the door. "Go," she whispered urgently as she slipped inside. The driver turned, surprised. He was broad-shouldered, with tired eyes and a face lined from years of work. His uniform was plain, his hair slightly messy. He looked at her cloak, then at the soldiers in the distance. "Rough night?" he asked in a low voice. Lysera's hands tightened around her pouch. "Please, just drive." The man studied her for a brief moment. Then, with a small shrug, he flicked the controls. The taxi lifted smoothly off the ground, merging into the flow of evening traffic. Behind them, soldiers spilled into the street. One raised a scanner, but the taxi was already gone, swallowed by the streams of light. Lysera exhaled, her body trembling with relief. She sank back against the seat, staring at the city rushing past outside. She had done it, at least for now. The driver glanced at her through the mirror. His voice was calm but curious. "Name's Daniel. Daniel Cross. And you are?" Lysera hesitated. Could she give him her true name? No. That would bring disaster to them both. She lowered her voice. Just someone trying to get away. Daniel chuckled softly. Fair enough. I've driven plenty of people running from something. Usually it's just unpaid debts. You don't look like one of those. She said nothing. Silence filled the taxi, broken only by the hum of engines. Lysra's thoughts spun. She had never spoken to a human before, not directly. Her tutors had described them as stubborn, reckless, even foolish at times. Yet this man's calmness under pressure was unexpected. He had seen soldiers at her back, and instead of questioning or hesitating, he had acted. No alien noble she knew would have done the same for a stranger. Daniel guided the taxi down narrow lanes, weaving through alleys where the scanners could not easily follow. His hands moved quickly over the controls, confident and steady. He seemed to know every shortcut, every hidden path through the massive city. You picked the wrong night for a ride, he said after a while, though his tone carried no anger. Half the district's crawling with patrols. Whoever you're running from, they've got reach. Lysra lowered her gaze. I had no choice. Funny thing about choices, Daniel replied, steering them into a darker passage. Some people say we don't have them. But me? I say there's always a choice. Sometimes it just costs more than you're ready to pay. His words lingered in her mind. Always a choice. For so long she had believed the opposite. Her entire life had been arranged, decided, sealed by signatures and seals. Yet here she was, sitting in a shabby human taxi, further from her family's control than ever before. The vehicle dipped into an underpass, the noise of the city fading. For a brief moment, it was only the two of them, and the soft vibration of the engines. Lysra pulled the hood tighter around her face. Can you take me to the starport? She asked. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Sure, but you should know, starports are the first place people look when someone runs. If your pursuers are half as serious as they seem, you'll find them waiting there. Her breath caught. He was right. Of course they would check. She had been foolish. Then where? She whispered. Daniel gave a half smile, one corner of his mouth curving upward. Relax. We'll figure something out. You're in my cab now. And if there's one thing I'm good at, it's getting people where they need to go, even when they don't know it yet. For the first time that night, Lysra felt a spark of hope. Perhaps she had not just escaped. Perhaps she had found an ally. Outside, the city stretched endlessly, a maze of lights and shadows. Soldiers spread their search, unaware that the runaway noble was already slipping beyond their reach. And in the driver's seat, Daniel Cross guided his taxi forward, carrying with him a passenger who would soon change his quiet, ordinary life into something far greater than he ever imagined. The taxi glided through the endless maze of Orcs Prime, engines humming with a steady rhythm. Neon signs flashed across the windows, their bright colors reflecting on Lysra's cloak. She sat in silence, clutching her pouch close to her chest. Every few seconds her eyes flicked to the windows, searching for the glimmer of patrol lights. But so far, they had not been followed. Daniel Cross, the human driver, looked almost too calm for the situation. His hands rested lightly on the steering, controls moving with a casual ease that surprised her. Most pilots she knew flew like machines, strict, precise, calculated. Daniel's style was different. He didn't just drive. He flowed with the traffic, slipping between larger hovercrafts, ducking into service lanes, and diving into gaps that seemed too narrow for passage. To Lysra, it looked reckless. To Daniel, it was second nature. Finally, unable to hold her silence, she asked, "Do you always drive like this?" Daniel glanced at her through the rear mirror, his brown eyes glinting with amusement. Like what? Like... She hesitated, searching for the right word. Like you are running from something all the time. He laughed, a deep and genuine sound that startled her. That's not driving, princess. That's surviving. You'll get used to it. Her chest tightened at the word princess. Did he know who she really was? She quickly looked down, pulling her hood lower. I am not, she began but stopped. To argue would only draw suspicion. Daniel seemed not to notice her panic. He shifted the taxi lower, sliding under a massive cargo freighter that rumbled overhead. Relax, I call everyone princess, makes people feel important. Lysera blinked. He didn't know. Relief washed through her, though a faint spark of annoyance followed. To him, she was just another passenger. That thought oddly stung. They rode in silence again. But Lysera could not keep her curiosity at bay. She had been raised in palaces, taught by scholars, lectured by diplomats. Yet never had she sat face to face with a human, alone, unguarded. Her teachers had always described humans as dangerous in their unpredictability, useful only for heavy labor, too reckless to be trusted, with real responsibility, and yet here he was, guiding her away from danger with confidence as though he had done this all his life. Why are you helping me? She asked suddenly. Daniel tilted his head. Why not? That is not an answer. He smirked. Look, I saw soldiers chasing you. You jumped into my cab. You looked scared enough to faint. What was I supposed to do, throw you out? I may not be rich, but I'm not heartless. His words were simple, but they carried a weight she was not used to. In her world, every action came with a cost, a bargain, a hidden deal. People helped only when it brought them power or profit. But Daniel spoke as if kindness itself was reason enough. Still, Lysera did not trust easily. You don't even know me. For all you know, I could be a criminal. Daniel chuckled. Maybe. But if you were, you'd be the best-dressed criminal I've ever had in my cab. And besides, he gave her a sideways look, his smile fading into something more thoughtful. I've been around enough real criminals to know the difference. You're not one of them. Lysera shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. The taxi dipped lower into the undercity, where the towers above gave way to darker, narrower streets. Here, the neon lights were fewer, the air thicker with smoke and steam. Small shops clung to the walls and vendors shouted from crowded walkways. Children darted between vehicles, laughing and chasing one another without fear of the traffic. Daniel slowed the taxi, weaving carefully through the chaos. Lysera stared in wonder. She had never been to this part of the city. Nobles avoided the undercity, calling it dangerous and unworthy of their time. Yet here she saw life. Messy, noisy, but alive in ways the palace never was. Daniel noticed her wide eyes. First time down here? Lysera nodded before she could stop herself. He grinned knowingly. Figures. You've got that look. Like someone who just stepped out of a storybook. She frowned. What do you mean? Fancy clothes under that cloak. The way you sit straight even when you're trying to hide. And the way you talk, like every word is a lesson you memorized. You're not from these streets, that's for sure. Lysera's pulse quickened. He was noticing too much, but instead of pressing her, Daniel turned the taxi down a quiet alley and parked beside an old maintenance station. End of the line, at least for now, he said, switching off the engine. Lysera stiffened. Why are we stopping? Because, Daniel replied, leaning back in his seat. You're not safe if we just keep driving in circles. Whoever's after you will scan every road sooner or later. Down here, the scanners don't work so well. Too much interference from the old wiring. Gives us a chance to breathe. She hesitated, but his reasoning made sense. Slowly, she lowered her hood, letting the dim light fall across her face. For the first time, Daniel got a clear look at her. His eyebrows rose slightly, but he said nothing for a moment. Then, with a small whistle, he leaned back. Well, now, I see why you're running. You've got the look of someone important, someone who's not supposed to be here. Lysera's throat tightened. If you know that, then you also know you're in danger. If they find me with you, they won't. Daniel interrupted, his tone steady. Not unless you want them to. The certainty in his voice startled her. Most people she knew would have turned her in already, eager for a reward or a favor from her family. But Daniel spoke as if the choice was hers, not his. Why? She whispered. Why would you risk yourself for me? He shrugged. Because I've been there. Not the noble stuff, not the arranged marriage, but the feeling. trapped. Like the walls are closing in and you can't breathe. I know what it's like to want out so badly you'd do anything for it. Lysra stared at him, words caught in her throat. She had never imagined a human, someone her people considered beneath notice, could understand her so clearly. Daniel leaned forward, resting his arms on the steering controls. Look, you don't have to tell me your story, not unless you want to. But if you're serious about running, then you need a plan. Running blind gets you caught. Running smart gets you free. Something inside Lysra shifted. For the first time, she felt less like a frightened girl fleeing her cage and more like someone who might actually find freedom. She asked quietly, "And you would help me? Even if it brings trouble?" Daniel smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "Trouble's nothing new for me. Besides, I've always liked a good fight against the odds." Lysra found herself smiling too, though faintly. It was strange sitting here in the worn seat of a shabby human taxi, feeling more understood than she had ever felt in the grand halls of her family's palace. Perhaps her escape had not been pure chance. Perhaps meeting this man, this stranger, behind the wheel, was exactly what fate had intended all along. Outside, the city roared on, blind to the small taxi hidden in its shadows. But inside, two lives had begun to cross in ways that would soon reshape both their destinies. The night on Orcs Prime grew louder as patrols spread across the districts. Hover drones floated above the towers, their bright beams scanning every corner, while armored soldiers marched through the streets. The noble houses had spoken. The runaway daughter of House Veyari had to be found, no matter the cost. Lysra sat in the back of the taxi, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She could hear the faint hum of scanners overhead even here, deep in the Undercity. The sound made her heart race. Every moment felt like it could be the one when soldiers discovered her. Daniel Cross leaned forward in the driver's seat, chewing on the inside of his cheek as he studied the night traffic. He didn't seem afraid, though he knew how serious the situation was. Soldiers weren't just searching, they were hunting. "You feel that hum?" Daniel asked, pointing up as the glow of a scanner beam passed above the taxi. Lysra nodded silently. "That's a grid sweep," he explained. "They're tightening the net. Won't be long before they start knocking on doors and checking IDs." Her voice was soft, but firm. "Then we must move quickly." Daniel gave a small smile. "No argument there. Buckle in, princess. It's going to get rough." Without warning, he switched on the engines at full power. The taxi lifted sharply, shooting out of the alley and back into the main flow of traffic. The sudden acceleration pressed Lysra against her seat, but she kept her eyes fixed on the city ahead. Almost instantly, a drone locked onto them. Its lights flared as it began pursuit, weaving through the air with mechanical precision. "They've spotted us," Lysra cried. "Relax," Daniel said, his hands steady on the controls. "It's only one drone, we can shake it." He tilted the taxi hard to the left, diving between two freight haulers. The larger crafts blasted their horns, their drivers shouting in protest, but Daniel didn't slow. The drone followed, zipping closer. "Can it keep up?" Lysra asked, her voice trembling. Daniel grinned. "Of course it can. But can it think?" At the last second, he pulled the taxi downward, slipping under a low bridge. The drone followed, but clipped the corner of the structure. Sparks flew as it spun out of control, crashing into the side of a building. Lysra gasped. You destroyed it." "Not destroyed," Daniel corrected. "Just helped it meet the wall a little sooner than it planned." He gave her a quick wink. "That's the thing about machines. They're fast, but they don't improvise." Lysra felt her heart still racing, but a spark of admiration slipped through her fear. His flying was unlike anything she had ever seen, but the chase wasn't over. As they cleared the bridge, more lights appeared in the distance. 3 patrol skimmers rose from the streets below, each armed with scanners and stun cannons. Their engines roared as they closed in. Daniel's smile faded into a look of concentration. "Okay, that's a bit more serious." Lysra clutched her pouch tightly. "Can we escape them?" Daniel's voice was calm, but determined. "We'll have to." The skimmers spread out, forming a triangle around the taxi. One shot a beam of light across their path, trying to blind them. Daniel twisted sharply, dodging the beam, and sped downward toward the crowded market streets. "Hold on," he shouted. The taxi plunged into the chaos of the night market. Dozens of stalls lined the walkways, glowing with lanterns and flickering signs. People shouted as the taxi roared past overhead. The skimmers followed, their lights cutting across the market. Lysra pressed herself against the seat, terrified they would crash. But Daniel maneuvered with incredible skill, darting between towers, skimming rooftops, and weaving through narrow alleys. His hands moved quickly, his eyes sharp, as if the city was part of him. "You've done this before," Lysra said, her voice shaking. Daniel chuckled. "Let's just say I wasn't always a taxi driver." One of the skimmers moved closer, preparing to fire. Daniel reached under his seat and pulled out a small device, a cube with blinking lights. "What is that?" Lysra asked. "Something I kept from my old job," he replied, tossing it out the window. The cube fell behind them, flashing brighter until it released a pulse of blue light. The skimmer's engines sputtered, its lights flickered, and then it spun helplessly into a wall. Sparks flew as the vehicle collapsed in a heap of metal. Lysra's eyes widened. That was amazing." Daniel shrugged modestly. "Just an old EMP pulse. Doesn't last long, but it does the trick." 2. Skimmers remained still hot on their trail. Daniel steered into a tunnel, the taxi's lights reflecting off the metallic walls. The sound of engines roared behind them, echoing like thunder. The tunnel narrowed. Lysra's breath caught in her throat. "We'll crash!" "Not if we're faster," Daniel said. He pushed the engines harder. The taxi sped forward, skimming dangerously close to the walls. The skimmers followed, but they were bulkier and less agile. One clipped the tunnel wall, sparks flying before it spun out and fell behind. Only one remained. As they burst out of the tunnel, the last skimmer was still on their tail. Daniel scanned the skyline quickly. Ahead, a massive billboard glowed, with bright colors, suspended above the streets by giant cables. Daniel smirked. Time to improvise. He shot the taxi upward, then suddenly tilted it sideways, scraping one of the billboard's support cables. The cable snapped free, whipping through the air. The billboard tilted dangerously, then collapsed right into the path of the pursuing skimmer. The patrol craft had no time to react. It slammed into the falling structure with a crash that echoed through the city. The taxi soared upward, leaving the chaos behind. Lysra's heart was pounding so hard she could hardly breathe. She looked at Daniel, who sat calmly in the driver's seat, his focus still sharp. "You," she whispered. "You just fought off an entire patrol." Daniel shrugged, his lips curling into a small smile. "Not fought. Escaped. Fighting's how you lose. Escaping's how you live." Lysra leaned back in her seat, her chest rising and falling as she tried to calm herself. She could not deny it anymore. This man, this simple human taxi driver, had just outwitted the patrols of one of the most powerful noble houses on Oris Prime. For the first time in her life, Lysra felt something she had never felt before: trust. She looked out the window, the city lights fading into the distance. The soldiers would not stop. They would keep searching, keep chasing. But as long as Daniel was behind the wheel, she believed, truly believed, that she might have a chance at freedom. The taxi disappeared into the night sky, carrying with it a runaway noble and a human driver whose courage and ingenuity had just changed everything. The city stretched endlessly beneath them, glowing with rivers of light. Daniel slowed the taxi once they had put enough distance between themselves and the patrol skimmers. The engines hummed softly, no longer straining. For the first time that night, there was quiet inside the small vehicle. Lysra leaned back against her seat, her body still trembling from the chase. Her heart felt as if it had run miles on its own. She looked at the man in the front seat, the human who had just outmaneuvered the soldiers of House Veyari. His face was calm, though sweat glistened at his temple. You saved me," she whispered. Daniel didn't turn around. His eyes stayed on the traffic ahead. "You're the one who jumped into my cab. I just did what I do best. She studied him carefully. There was no pride in his voice, no attempt to show off. He had risked everything, not for reward, but simply because she had needed help. That thought weighed heavily on her. In her world, favors always had a price. Yet here was a man who asked for nothing. The silence stretched until Lysra finally spoke again. You should know who I am. Daniel raised an eyebrow but said nothing, waiting. I am Lysra Vayari, she said, her voice firm despite the fear that lingered. Daughter of House Vayari, the nobles you saw chasing us tonight, they were sent for me. Daniel let out a slow whistle. I figured you were important. Didn't think you were that important. Lysra lowered her gaze. I was promised into a marriage I did not choose. My family sealed the contract without my voice. Tonight I ran away. And now, because of me, you are hunted as well. For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. Lysra feared he might stop the taxi and order her out, but instead he sighed and leaned back in his seat. Well, he said lightly, that explains the army on our tail. You don't understand, Lysra pressed. If they catch me with you, you will not just lose your taxi, you will lose your life. My family will not forgive this. Daniel finally turned, his eyes meeting hers through the dim cabin light. You think I don't know danger when I see it? You think I helped you without realizing the risk? His voice was steady but not harsh. I made my choice the moment. I hit the accelerator. Lysra blinked, caught off guard. Why? Why would you choose this? Daniel looked forward again, his gaze fixed on the endless city lights. Because sometimes the right thing is the only thing, and because... He hesitated, then added quietly, I know what it's like to be trapped, to feel like you have no control over your own life. No one should have to live that way. His words settled deeply in her chest. For years, Lysra had believed she was alone in her struggle, that no one outside her family's walls could ever understand the cage she lived in. Yet this human, a simple taxi driver, spoke as if he had walked the same path. The taxi dipped lower, moving into the shadows of abandoned factories. Daniel guided it toward a hidden landing pad, concealed beneath broken towers. He set the vehicle down gently and the engines went quiet. Lysra looked around nervously. Why here? Daniel opened the side door, letting the cool night air drift inside. Because we need to talk without scanners buzzing overhead, and because you need to decide what happens next. She stepped out, her boots crunching against the cracked metal floor. The air here smelled of rust and smoke. The city above was distant, like another world entirely. Daniel leaned against the taxi, folding his arms. You've got two choices, Lysra. One, you go back, turn yourself in, face whatever future your family wrote for you. Safe, comfortable, but never yours. Lysra's chest tightened. The very thought of returning filled her with dread. Daniel continued. Or two, you keep running. But if you choose that, it won't be easy. You'll be hunted. You'll lose everything you knew. Status, power, protection. You'll live with danger at every turn. Lysra looked down at her hands. They were trembling again, but not from fear, this time from the weight of the choice. Daniel's voice softened. I won't tell you what to do. I'll drive you wherever you ask, but the choice has to be yours. For a long time, Lysra stood in silence. Her whole life, decisions had been made for her. By her parents, by tradition, by duty. And now, for the first time, someone was asking her to choose for herself. She lifted her gaze, meeting Daniel's steady eyes. I will not go back, she said firmly. Daniel nodded slowly. Then you've made your choice. A strange sense of relief washed over her. The fear was still there, but it was lighter now, replaced by something else. Something that felt like strength. Daniel pushed himself off the taxi and stretched his arms. All right then, if you're running, you'll need more than courage. You'll need a plan. Lysra tilted her head. A plan? Freedom isn't just running, Daniel said. It's surviving long enough to build something better. And if you're serious, then you're going to need someone who knows the roads, the alleys, the tricks that keep you one step ahead. Lucky for you, that's my specialty. Lysera couldn't help a small smile. So you would stay with me? Even now? Daniel grinned. Like I said, already made my choice. They spent the next hour in the shadows of the broken towers, speaking quietly. Daniel explained the ways of the Undercity, the places where scanners failed, the smugglers who asked no questions, the transport routes that no noble would ever notice. Lysera listened intently, realizing how little she truly knew of her own. At one point, she asked, "Why do you know all of this? You said you were only a taxi driver." Daniel's expression grew distant. "I used to be more. Cargo runs across war zones, smuggling when times were bad. Taxi driving's just quieter, until tonight." There was something in his voice, a history of battles and scars she could only imagine. But he offered no more, and she did not press. Instead, she simply said, "I am glad you were there when I needed someone." For a moment, the air between them felt different, lighter, warmer. Daniel looked at her, then quickly turned away, clearing his throat. "We should get moving. They won't stop looking for you." Lysera nodded, pulling her cloak tighter. "Where will we go?" Daniel opened the taxi door, gesturing for her to step inside. "Somewhere they won't expect. Somewhere you can start to be more than just the name they gave you." She climbed back into the seat, her heart steady now. For the first time, she felt the weight of her chains loosening. As the taxi lifted once more into the night sky, Lysera realized something important. Freedom was not just about escaping her family. It was about choosing her own path. And she had chosen. And though the galaxy would see Daniel Cross as nothing more than a human taxi driver, to her he had become something far greater. The one who reminded her that choice, no matter how dangerous, was worth everything. The engines roared softly as the taxi vanished into the endless city night, carrying with it two fugitives bound not by blood or duty, but by the shared decision to live, free. The night stretched on as the taxi moved silently across the lower skies of Horus Prime. The great towers above seemed to glow like frozen flames, each one a reminder of the world Lysera had left behind. Yet for the first time in her life, she did not feel tied to those towers. She was not a daughter under her family's command anymore. She was Lysera, herself, free to choose. Daniel guided the taxi with steady hands. His face looked tired, but his eyes remained sharp. He had flown through dangers before, but this night had been different. A runaway noble sat in his cab, and, with her, the weight of a choice that could change both their futures. Neither of them spoke for a long while. The city around them hummed with life, but inside the taxi, there was only quiet thought. Lysera finally broke the silence. "Do you think they will give up the search?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "Not likely. Families like yours don't take humiliation well. They'll chase you to the edge of the stars if they have to." Lysera's chest tightened. She had known it, but hearing it out loud made the truth heavier. "Then, what should we do?" Daniel glanced at her in the mirror. "We keep moving, stay one step ahead, and maybe if we're smart, we can find a way to disappear." The word disappear lingered in her mind. To vanish from the grip of her family to start a new life was a dream she had never thought possible. And now, sitting in this shabby human taxi, it seemed almost within reach. But fate would not let them go so easily. From the distance came the sound of engines, sharp, powerful, and growing closer. Daniel stiffened. "They're back." Lysera's heart jumped. "Already?" "Patrol skimmers," Daniel muttered, adjusting the controls. "They must have traced us somehow. Hold on." The taxi dove into a narrow district filled with half-built towers. Metal scaffolding rose high above, forming a maze of steel beams and platforms. Daniel weaved through them at high speed, the patrol lights flashing behind. Lysera gripped the seat tightly. She could hear the sharp whine of the skimmers closing in. "Can we lose them?" she asked. Daniel smirked. "We can try something better, He pulled the taxi low, flying just above the construction floors. Sparks flew as he skimmed close to the beams. The patrol skimmers followed, but they were heavier and less agile. One clipped a scaffold, crashing into the structure with a burst. "A fire," Lysra gasped. "That was luck," Daniel said quickly. "Don't count on it twice." Two more skimmers remained, pressing closer. Daniel swung the taxi toward the far end of the district, where a massive crane stretched into the sky. Its magnet carried a bundle of metal scrap hanging dangerously overhead. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Perfect. He timed it carefully, racing the taxi beneath the crane just as the magnet released its load. Tons of scrap metal came crashing down. The first skimmer swerved too late. It slammed into the falling debris, bursting apart in midair. Only one remained. The last skimmer fired a stun blast, the beam narrowly missing the taxi. Daniel cursed under his breath. They're not giving up. Lysra's pulse raced. She looked out the window, her eyes scanning desperately. Then she saw it, an old service tunnel built into the side of a hill. It was narrow, half-hidden, and covered with faded warning signs. "There!" she cried, pointing. Daniel followed her finger and spotted the tunnel. A grin spread across his face. "Not bad, princess." He swung the taxi hard to the right and dove into the tunnel. The skimmer tried to follow, but the tunnel was too narrow. With a screech of tearing metal, the patrol craft clipped the edges and exploded in a shower of sparks. Silence followed. Daniel slowed the taxi, the echo of the blast fading into the distance. He looked at Lysra through the mirror, his grin still, wide. "You've got good eyes. That little move might have saved us both." Lysra's chest still heaved from fear, but she felt something else rising inside. Pride. For the first time, she had not only relied on him, she had helped. They drove deeper into the tunnel, finally emerging into the countryside beyond the city. Here the towers were distant shadows, replaced by rolling hills and quiet fields under the starlit sky. Lysra leaned against the window, gazing upward. "I have never seen the stars from here. They look free." Daniel glanced at her. "That's the thing about stars. They don't belong to anyone. Not to families, not to houses, just themselves." His words struck her deeply. For so long she had been told she belonged to her family, her house, her duty. But here, beyond the reach of the towers, she felt the truth. She could belong only to herself. The taxi landed in a quiet clearing surrounded by trees. Daniel shut off the engines and the night became still. He stepped out, stretching his arms, then looked at her seriously. "Lysra, this isn't just about running anymore. You've got to decide how you want to live. If we keep moving, you'll be hunted. If you want safety, you could still go back. But whatever you choose, it has to be your choice." She stepped out, the grass soft beneath her feet. The air smelled fresh, nothing like the heavy smoke of the city. She looked up at the endless sky and felt the weight of her life pressing against her chest. "I will not go back," she said firmly. "Even if I must live as a shadow, even if I must give up everything, I choose freedom." Daniel studied her for a moment, then gave a slow nod. "Then freedom it is." Lysra turned to him. "But I cannot do this alone. Will you stay with me?" He smiled faintly. "Thought you'd never ask. A runaway noble and a taxi driver, it's not exactly the safest team. But maybe it's the right one." For the first time in her life, Lysra laughed freely. The sound echoed in the quiet night, light and unrestrained. Together they sat on the hood of the taxi, staring at the stars. They did not know what tomorrow would bring. More chases, more danger, perhaps even greater enemies. But tonight, they had won their first battle. Tonight, they had chosen their own path. And somewhere deep inside, Lysra believed this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless worlds and endless possibilities. With Daniel by her side, she no longer feared it. The noble houses would keep searching. The soldiers would not stop. But Lysra was no longer the girl trapped in a palace. She was free, and she was ready to face whatever came next. As the night wind rustled the trees, Daniel leaned back with a quiet grin. "So, where to, princess?" Lysera smiled at the stars. "Anywhere but back." The engines roared again as the taxi lifted into the sky. And in that moment, beneath the endless starlight, a runaway noble and a human taxi driver began their journey into the unknown, toward a future neither of them could yet imagine, but one they had chosen together.